Hello and welcome. I am so glad that you have joined me today. We'll be continuing in our study of the book of Judges and we'll be looking at Judges chapter 18 today. So get yourself a cuppa and we'll get started. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I look forward to reading some of your comments. So this chapter, it follows the last chapter. We are following an interesting character. He's a Levite who has gone rogue. He's a priest for hire. Last chapter, we saw again and again how he compromised his calling and position as a Levite, and he did what was right in his own eyes. In this chapter, the author opens with the fact that Israel has no king, and the people are doing what is right in their own eyes. And God was supposed to be their king. But they've abandoned him and they have chased after what the world could offer them. And we're now looking at the steadily increasing decline of Israel. And it's just going to get worse and worse in the next couple of chapters of Judges. Let's look at verse 1. In verse 1, in those days Israel had no king. In those days the tribe of Dan was seeking a place of their own where they might settle because they had not yet come into the inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So Dan thought that they had a problem. They thought that they needed a place to stay because they had not yet come into the inheritance among the tribes of Israel. Verse 2. They think that they don't have any land because they have failed to drive out the Canaanites during the conquest. But Joshua has actually already allocated this land to the Danites, but they were having trouble occupying it because the enemy kept trying to occupy it. Instead of fighting against Laish, which we'll see later on, the Danites should have fought for their own God-given territory. And there's a lesson in that for all of us. We need to stop trying to be a person that God's not trying to call us to be, and instead we need to focus on the ministry that he has called us to do. Verse 2. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah to Ashtol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go and explore the land. So the Danites, they think they have a plan. They send out some spies to explore the land in search for a better place to live. They did not consult or inquire of the Lord to see what his plans were. They should have asked, Lord, you have given us this land. Our enemy is very strong. We want to be faithful to you. What is your plan, God, for us to settle this land? But instead, they hatch their own plan and they decide corporately, so the whole of the Danites support this, that they should go and live elsewhere. Second half of Verse 2, so they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. This is who we saw in the last chapter, where they spent the night. And while they were there near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of a young Levite. So they turned in there and they asked him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? And why are you here? So as the Danite spies, they're travelling north, they pass through Ephraim, and they must have come close to Micah's house, and they hear a familiar voice. We're not quite sure if they recognised his voice specifically or the actual person, or whether they just recognised the local dialect of how this priest spoke. Maybe he wasn't using the colloquial language of the average Israelite, but he spoke more of the air of a priest. Either way, they found this Levite in a place where he shouldn't be. And they asked him, perhaps from a place of confusion, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here? And the Levite, he simply answers, verse 4, then he told them what Micah had done for him. He said, he has hired me as a priest. And then the Danites said to him, please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful. So the Danites, by the action of asking this Levite to inquire of the Lord, they support the idea that this Levite is acting as a priest. So these Danites are just as bad as Micah and just as bad as the Levite. They're all rejecting the requirements and the precepts that God has given in the law. They're all embracing this divergent approach to worshipping God, which is really no true worship at all. It's actually idolatry. And so the Danites, they asked the priests to ask God if their mission to attack the people of Laish will be successful. And they're basically hoping that God will approve and bless their plans. They're not asking God what his plans are. They're not submitting to God. They should have sought the Lord's will before they sent these reconnaissance scouts. And God is in no way obliged to bless their plans that they have made in their own flesh. The Levite answer should have been, I cannot inquire of the Lord for you because I am not a priest. But no, he keeps playing this role of the priest and pretends to inquire of the Lord. He makes up some pleasing words. Maybe it was wishful thinking. He says, verse 6, the priest answered them, go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval. As a side thought, would you trust this priest? The Danites were deceived in trusting this priest in the first place. Verse 7. So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw the people were living there in safety, like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. So the Danites, they discover this city that was not occupied by the Israelites, but it was a colony of the Sidonians. And this was a group that God had told to drive out of Canaan in Joshua 13, verse 4. And Sidon, so he's the father of these people. Sidon was the firstborn of Canaan. And seeing that this land was good, in Judges 18, verse 9, that the city was not heavily defended, and the Danites believed that this would be a good city to conquer and to take as their own territory. So where is Laish? Laish later on is called Dan. We'll see that. But it was at this time known as Laish. Laish is a Sidonian township. It is far north, right at the top of Israel. It's in Manasseh. And the Sidonians, they were descendants from the firstborn of Canaan. The Sidonians lived more really on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. But the Laish Sidonians had separated themselves. They'd moved inland. And we learn that isolation makes people vulnerable to attack from the enemy. And this is why we must stay in contact and connected with other strong Christians. The author of Hebrews, he encourages us by telling us not to give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another. We see that in Hebrews 10, verse 25a. Now this place, Laish, it still exists. It's no longer called Dan. It's no longer called Laish. It's called Tel Dan, and it has a beautiful nature reserve. It is lush and it has beautiful fresh running water. It's a nice place to stay. Verse 8, when they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked, how did you find things? And they asked, come on, let's attack. We've seen this land and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. And when you get there, you will find an unsuspecting people, the spacious land that God has put into our hands, a land that lacks nothing whatsoever. So the Danites, they agree to go to Laish. They attack and they relocate there because they think that God has put it in their hands. Verse 11. Then 600 men of the Danites armed for battle set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. And this is why the place west of Kiriath and Jearim is called May Hannah Dan to this day. From there, they went to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. So it seems that Micah's house may have been on a trade route or some sort of major-ish highway. This is the second time they've come past his house on the way to heading north. Verse 14, then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do. So now the Danites are not only on a mission to find a new place and settle in a land of another tribe, it's Manasseh, they're going to rob the tribes along the way. So the other tribes, they're brothers. They were all set up because they're all really one family of Israel. Where is the love? Where is the respect for their fellow brothers? Verse 15, they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. So they greet the Levite. And it makes me wonder how friendly this greeting was. 600 armed men would be quite an intimidating sight. Verse 17, the 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 men stood at the entrance of the gate. And when the 5 men went into Micah's house, they took the idol and the ephod and the household gods and the priest and said to them, "What are you doing?" And they answered him, "Be quiet, don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and our priest. Isn't it better for you to serve a tribe than a clan in Israel as a priest rather than just one household?" Now the Danites are deceived into thinking that they can hire a Levite to serve one tribe. Micah used the Levite to serve his own family, and now the Danites are having a similar thought. So both are deceived into thinking that they can misuse God's law for their own benefit. Verse 20, the priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, the idol, and went along with the people of Dan. So the Danites have appealed to this Levite's ego, and the Levite cannot resist this tempting offer to be more than just a personal priest to a single family. Now he's offered to be a priest of a whole tribe. Imagine the fame, imagine the position of power, imagine the respect and honour, imagine the wealth. He can't resist the offer. He is very pleased. And the Levite, being the compromising man that he is, still has not learned to honour God and obey and follow his ways. So the priest is very pleased with the idea of ministering to the Danite tribe, and he willingly goes with the Danites to preside as priest over in their territory. But this territory is actually assigned to a different clan. He should not have been there. He's acting like an itinerant priest, presuming that he can minister anywhere. Now, I have nothing against itinerant preachers, but you go where God calls you, not just where you want to go and what's convenient for you. The Levites, they stole the ephod, they stole the household god and the priest, and now they're on their way to attack this peaceful, vulnerable Sidonian community. It paints a picture of how far Israel has fallen away from God. Verse 21, putting their little children and their livestock and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. So they're leaving Micah's house now, and they're starting on their journey to head north. So verse 21, the Danites, they leave Ephraim, they're putting their children and their livestock and so their possessions, so the things that are valuable and vulnerable, they're putting them in front of them. And the Danites, because the Danites are expecting that the Ephraimites are going to confront them, so they put their army at the back. The vulnerable and the valuable are protected from the oncoming Ephraimites because the army is at the rear. Verse 22, when they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah called together and overtook the Danites. And as they shouted after them, the Danites said to Micah, "What is the matter with you that you have called your men out to fight?" And Micah replies, "You took my God I had made. You took my priest and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask, what is the matter with you?" So this verse 24, there is a lot. There is a lot in Micah's response, and we'll unpack it bit by bit. So he says, "You took the God I made, or the gods I made." And so he freely admits that the idols are just a man-made object. And how can this be any God at all? He says they took it. So a guy called Gary Hamrick, he says, gods that can be taken are no gods at all. So if you can pick up a god and move it and take it to another place, it's not really a god. He says, you took my priest, and the Levite was never his priest to begin with. In fact, the Levite was never a legitimate priest. So the fact that he took his priest, it just seems unfounded. Then he says, what else do I have? This is why he's upset, because he thinks he's got nothing left. But he has a house, he has land, he has a son or sons, he has his mother, he even has the one true God. He has covenantal promises. He has a hope for eternity. He has atonement offered to him through the priesthood and sacrifices. He has everything he needs, but he claims he has nothing because he has put such an extreme, disproportionate value on this worthless chunk of silver. And now that this worthless chunk of silver is lost, he thinks he has nothing of value. Verse 25, the Danites answered, don't argue with us, or some of the men might get angry and attack you and your family, and you will lose your lives. So the Danites went away, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. So under threat of his life, Micah relinquishes his claim on the idol, the ephod and the priests, and he goes back home. Verse 27, then they took what Micah had made and the priest, and they went to Laish against the people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword. They burnt down their city, and there was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anybody else. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob, and the Danites rebuilt the city and they settled there. So I wrestled a lot with the idea of what the Danites had done. My brain went around in circles. My first thought was a measure of sympathy for the vulnerable and peaceful Sidonians. They were slaughtered by an unsuspecting army. They were unprepared. They were unarmed. And it's always just a little bit unsettling when we hear stories about vulnerable people who are abused by powerful people. So that was sort of unsettling me. And then my second thought was, well, that these are Sidonians. These were Canaanites. Sidon was the son of Canaan, and God had told the people of Israel to get rid of them. Otherwise, they were going to persuade the Israelites to follow other gods. So then I thought, well, maybe it was right. And then I had a third thought, and then I thought, maybe these Sidonians could have been proselytes. Maybe they could have been willing to believe in the Lord if given the opportunity to repent and follow him, like Rahab. Rahab was a Canaanite, and she believed in God, and she became a proselyte and was incorporated into Israel, and she became a very well-known person. She's in the line of Jesus Christ himself. But my mind was running around in circles, and the only place I could find rest with this issue was the fact that Dan really had overstepped their boundaries. God didn't call them to fight the Sidonians directly. He did not call them to be in the land of Manasseh. They had their own land, and they were way outside the borders of Dan. So Dan was going rogue, just like the lonely Levite. And Israel is no better, possibly even worse than the surrounding nations. The Danites, they were an Israelite tribe. They attack a peaceful town, and they set up a place of worship against all that God had commanded in the law. Verse 29, they named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel. Though the city used to be called Laish, there the Danites set up for themselves an idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of captivity in the land. So this is about 400 years they did this. They continued to use the idol Micah had made all this time. The house of God was in Shiloh. So they continued to use this idol the whole time that the tabernacle was in Shiloh until they were overtaken by the Babylonians. So depending on your version in the Bible, bear with me a second, in verse 30, you may see a reference to the Levite being the son of Moses, but it should be noted that the original Hebrew says son of Manasseh, which kind of makes a little bit more sense because the Danites were actually in Manasseh at the time. But again, whether he's a descendant of Moses or whether he's a descendant of Manasseh, either way, they've appointed a priest that was not a Levite from the tribe of Aaron. So they're doing their own thing, they're going rogue. We see again the decline of Israel into idolatry. They're rejecting God as their king and they're doing what is right in their own eyes. And that's all I have for you for Judges chapter 18. It's been a pleasure again, and I look forward to next time when we're looking at Judges chapter 19. Bye.